Amy, maybe we'll start with introductions of each of us, and then we'll open up for the questions. And I want to appreciate too Amy Lund, who helped us make that video for this. Just a lot of work we've done over the last couple of years putting that stuff together, and some of it new, some of it old footage, and just a really cool thing. So I appreciate her work with that too. I'm Joey Chenyan. I'm our education director. I've been with the school about over 10 years now, and very happy to be here today.
Hey, I am Renee Swanson, the Assistant Director of Educational Programming, and I've been at the school for 12 years. I'm in my 12th year, and I teach, as you saw in that video, biology and environmental studies.
Hey everybody, my name is Amanda Galloway. I am one of the lead advisors at High School for Recording Art, amongst other things, but I've been there for about 7 years.
Cool. So love to hear if anybody has any questions about this year, about our system, anything at all, we'd love to answer. Jump on in.
Hi, my name is Kristen Olinger, and I teach at an alternative school in Mankato, Minnesota. And Renee, would you be willing to talk a little bit more about the validations, the rubric that you use for the self-assessment?
Yeah, so we base the rubric off of the competencies that with the competencies and validations that we have. So it kind of goes one of two ways. One, if it's maybe something that I've more developed for the students to do, I have the specific competencies, science competencies I want them to work on in that rubric, but is very much all I do is list the competencies. It's all about student self-reflection, student assessment. When we go to more project-based work, the student actually goes through all my science competencies and says, you know, I want to make sure I'm working on whatever specific skill. If it's a science literacy specific skill, like connecting science topics, reading like a scientist, interpreting graphs and data, or if they want to pick some scientific inquiry skills, or kind of a high level, especially grounded in the social justice pillar of our education, are the sense of place ones, where they really focus on like a community-based science project that they want to focus on. So the students can do, like, I want to do a straight up science literacy project, straight up scientific inquiry, or they can kind of mix and match. And if you really, when we get a little bit higher level with the projects, they can even go cross-curricular with it. So it's all about them saying, yes, I've been in this science class and I learned about this topic of photosynthesis or mitosis or whatever it might be, but I'm able to, like you kind of saw with that self-paced classroom, really meet with the students individually and kind of assess in real time their content knowledge. But I'm able to have these discussions with them about, like, how does this actually really apply to you? What part of this is really ringing true to you? And that's where we kind of start to dive into what might be a valuable project for them to do that's really relevant to them. And then they design their own, basically their own rubric based off of the competencies and the skills that they want to build through that project. And that's done like initially and right away. That's at the very beginning. I don't wait to assess until the end. And so that becomes like a living document that we are always referencing throughout our check-ins in the project process. You know, this is great. I had a student do an exotic lake project after doing an ecology project, and she had heard about exotic lakes around the world. And so I was able to check in with her, make sure she's on par with her research, but is she actually still staying true to those skills that she wanted to build through doing this research? And again, it's so in all of the check-ins, it's like, great, you're doing this, you're staying on track, but you know, are you staying true to, you know, interpreting graphs and data? Where are you finding that information? How, you know, or whatever it might be. And of course, it's a living document. So if they start down the research path and different skills or competencies are starting to surface, they can do that. And then, so they do a pre-reflection, a pre-assessment, I guess, before they start the project to kind of self-assess where they might be in those skill areas. And then they do a post-assessment on those same competencies once they finish. And then the other piece that was in my mind, and then I just lost it. Oh, it's okay for them to maybe pick some competencies or validations that they might already feel they're kind of strong in, because it's good for them to continue practicing those. But I do encourage them to also pick some that they want to build throughout the process as well.
I think Renee, I'd add a little bit to it just to take it to the wide lens. Our school is really influenced by the the St. Paul Open School that was founded in the 70s by Dr. Wayne Jennings. And our founder, T.C. Ellis, went to that school and had a lot of success there after not finding success in other more traditional institutions. But in that space, they have something that I think a lot of schools more commonly call a grad profile now, which is that core set of skills and knowledge that students need to develop and showcase evidence of learning within to graduate. The St. Paul Open School, they presented it as a portfolio, and a lot of the learning took place in an open walled environment where students would go out in the community, have experiences in their real lives, and then justify that with community validators and evidence of learning to present as a project within their school. HSRA now is founded and has structured itself in a really similar way. So when Renee's talking about the competencies and the validation system that we have at our school, we have a bunch of different skills and knowledge that are community through focus groups, including our students, our staff, many of our teachers, many of our parents, a lot of people in the community. We're able to put together lists and things that they wanted to make sure that when an HSRA student graduates, that they've spent time and developed skills in a bunch of key areas. And from there, we work backwards and we norm those with a lot of the best practices coming out of Harvard and different educational organizations doing work with competency-based learning and grad profiles across the country. And we put together a complex system that then students can use in Renee's classroom, or to do an independent project, or even just to help guide them when they're thinking about the things that they need to get done before they finish. They once again at our school can do open wall learning, can validate a project with partnership with the community validator, and they put together a portfolio when they graduate, which is filled with letters from community members, from different members of the school that they've worked with, evidence and artifacts of learning, and just a lot of stuff that expands upon what would be a traditional CV or resume, that is a lot more built out and justified for young people. So it gives them like different types of certifications they might have received in different creative labs we have in our school, gives them an edge in that post-secondary world, whether they go to college, the trades, or they try to make it on as an entrepreneur. They're leaving with a lot of artifacts that they can present to the community.
And then I'll just say that we are a recording arts school, and so often the project-based component does come through a creative expression of sorts, whether it be in the studios or in our design zone lab or in our art space. That is highly encouraged for the student to, some students want to do a PowerPoint or whatever it might be, but a lot of times we transition them to more a creative space for their project exhibition. And just like a really human aspect of it, there is nothing that makes my job better than what it is to have a student like sit down with me, and it is all about them and, you know, assessing. It's not about like, here's this thing I created, are you going to give me a grade and what's it going to be? And it's just like, it's this amazing process to go through to hear the student just own it, and they get to speak on their growth areas. To have them feel that within themselves, and to have them like own that, and to not waiting for someone else to find it in them, although, you know, we help them through the process, is just so, I don't want to say fulfilling because that's not the right word, but it is just so meaningful. It's just to see a student feel so empowered like that. And to be in a school that allows that space and encourages it is just amazing.
That's a big goal for us, is and kind of a deep talks process for a lot of students who haven't found success in traditional schools before they get to us, is to really have them identify what's meaningful to them, that there's transferable skills and knowledge that are relevant to their life, and that they can use their interest in those things as a part of their projects, as things that they want to showcase learning within and develop skill pathways within. And young people really appreciate that. You know, we every year we move further and further away from any sort of traditional grading structure. We like student self-assessment. So it's all about what is the use of this to you? How are you developing? How's it going to be worthwhile for you when you leave here? And when students start to pick up on that, it's like Renee said, it's a big transformation. Amanda, I'll tap you a little bit for this too, because we interviewed a ton of students this summer who said similar stuff about how the relationships they built and the authentic learning really helped them.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think just from that moment when they meet their advisor and they sit down with them and we do that PLP process with them and really just get to know them as an individual. I think a lot of our students voiced how important that was for them. Because a lot of times in schools, they don't have that connection with somebody, right? And maybe one person or two. A lot of our students talked a lot about that during those interviews as well too. So it's really important to build that relationship, find out what they're interested in, and then it's easier to kind of get them excited about education again, right? I think a lot of times they kind of have this sour taste in their mouth from education at times. Maybe they had a bad experience with somebody or whatever else. But when we can really just say, hey, what are your interests? What do you like to do for fun? And then pair that with some of the things like, hey, Renee's got this really cool project that we could pair you up with, or, you know, Joey's got this really exciting thing that he's doing over here. You know, that's what really works and resonates with our students when we're able to kind of pair that and, like Joey was saying, make it meaningful to them and relevant, right? Because that is the main question. When am I going to need this? Why do I need to do it? Like all those things, right? But if we can really pull that learning from those things that they love and they're passionate about, sky's the limit for our kids. So it's super dope.
And it's cool because they're very authentic in their assessment of themselves. Like they're not just trying to sugarcoat it to get a good grade or anything like that. You know, because you've been kind of working with them throughout the whole process. You kind of already might know in your mind, like that, you know, what growth they might have had and how their skills developed, or maybe they didn't. You know, maybe there's still areas you need to improve on. But they don't need you to tell them that. They know it, and they're very authentic in how they assess.
It was probably a much longer answer to your question, Kristen, than maybe you bargained for, but we got more, so keep them coming.
No, that was really good and helpful. Thank you.
Heather, I see your comment in the chat too. The learners participating in developing the rubrics. And like I said, it is an extremely powerful point of learning for all of us involved in the process. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's really important because oftentimes the feedback that we give to students, particularly at the secondary level, when students are 18, 19, 20 years old and just trying to, you know, we hear often, I'm just trying to get done. I just want to be out of school. I want to get to the next step. When we start to explore, well, what's the next step? A lot of students really haven't considered that yet, you know, what they're going to do next. But they know that, you know, they might be a little bit behind and they feel pressure to catch up. But then giving them ownership over their learning all the way down to the grading process, you know, it just flips a switch in their mind about how, you know, education isn't something that's done to me by someone else in power, right? Education is something that I own, that is a part of my life, that I can make progression in, and I can evaluate myself in. We know, I'm sure everybody in here has had the experience with a young person as a learner where they're much harder on themselves than any educator or reviewer as an adult would be. You know, they're much more authentic within it, but that's where real growth takes place. And you saw in the video, we had a student, D'Anthony, interviewed, where he said, you know, he's really embraced that failure as a part of his learning process, you know, and in the arts, that's of course absolutely important. You have to fail 1,000 times before you get where you want. But for him to kind of experience that through projects and like Amanda was talking about, all the support we put around students, it really helps young people to kind of rekindle that flame of passion around learning in institutional spaces. You know, oftentimes they think learning is something that they do with their friends or in other spaces or at the recording studio outside of school or wherever. But for it to take place in school, it's a whole process of developing a relationship and really scaffolding techniques and skills for the students to kind of take their ownership back in their educational journey.
I was hoping maybe you guys could talk a little bit about in the video, one of the students in the beginning said that it was his third home, that and that takes a lot to develop that culture for students to feel safe and comfortable. And I know, having visited your school, that there's a lot of intentionality that goes into making sure that students have a positive, developing a positive sense of self, a positive identity for themselves. So could you guys talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's an important part of both your school, but also student-centered learning as a foundation.
Amanda, do you want to start off with that one?
Sure. I mean, to me, it's like starting off with, what do you need? with a lot of our students, you know, just finding out kind of where some of those gaps and holes are with our students, and kind of just figuring out what types of supports can we provide for them so they do feel fully supported and feel like this is their home, you know. I think just the openness that all of us have, you know, we're all kind of just like, hey, whatever you need, let's have a conversation about it. We notice things a lot about our kids, so, you know, paying attention to, you know, their behaviors, and, you know, maybe this person's having a bad day today, so I can go over and say, hey, what's going on? You know, maybe you need to be in this space today, and let's do some music or something like that to kind of get them back in the spirits of things. I mean, just really being involved with them and just being that support, because a lot of them lack that support outside of school. So, I mean, especially with the pandemic and stuff, just talking to the students and just, you know, listening to them and just being that ear for them a lot of the time is what helps build that relationship and the consistency with them, you know. That's, I think we can put all of the things in there that we want, you know, all the physical things, but it's that genuine love and, you know, care that we have for our kids, that to me, that's what provides that home feeling for them.
And there's some things that we do in our system that I think is distinctive that really help create that environment and give our staff a lot of the ability to do the stuff that Amanda's saying. I think for one, we have a really robust intake process that Amanda's talking about, where the student, you know, we hear all the time, well, nobody's ever asked me that before, or do you care about that? You're interested in that? I think a lot of times when students, like, we enroll students throughout the whole year. We're still enrolling students this week for this year, right? Like the end of this week is when we stop, but it's for a reason, because like we, with our mission and who we're serving, you know, sometimes there's a different time for every student when they're ready to transition into a program like ours, and they need us to be ready for them. So in our intake process, we have a really robust survey, and we have a lot of really highly skilled youth mentors that serve as advisors that sit down with young people as they come in, just ask questions. A lot of them personal, a lot of them like have to do with like some character situations that might be going on in their life, and we have a lot of wraparound services that we then connect them with. But that is so refreshing for young people, because I think a lot of the times with schools, if a young person transfers, their first experience is to immediately just get a schedule and get put into a classroom. And oftentimes, particularly if a student has been bouncing around between other institutions or has chaotic situations in their personal life, they need more than that for like the intake process, and to feel supported and to start to develop a sense of a trust and security in the space. You know, oftentimes when you're just pushed in the classroom, things are going and you don't know anybody, you feel insecure, and oftentimes a defense mechanism is I'm just going to disconnect or detach or maybe not show up anymore. But we take a lot of time and space to build those relationships, and we put that at a priority over all the really amazing stuff that Renee and other teachers are doing in those workshops. Like, first and foremost, students need to build a foundational relationship. They need to develop a team. They need to meet people. They need to, and another piece of it is built into our schedule is a philosophy we've said over the years of deliberate patience. So when Amanda's talking about maybe it's not your day, you're not ready to go to math class right away, or whatever it is, you know, we have all these really amazing kinesthetic and aesthetic learning spaces that are therapy spaces, whether it's a studio booth, whether it's the gym, whether it's our dance studio, whether it's a visual art lab, whether it's behind a camera. There's all these different spaces where if a student comes in and they're going through stuff, we have, you know, oftentimes more than a third of our students are homeless and highly mobile. Many of our students are experiencing compound PTSD, you know, in real time. They're experiencing situations that are just really tough for a young person to deal with, and they need to have a therapeutic space to decompress, you know, before they're ready to jump into the math classroom or whatever else it is. But we found building into our structure spaces and patience, explicit patience, and opportunities for students to find success, not following that path that's been prescribed for them, but asking for what they need and getting it, and having the space to do it, has been enormously restorative, and has allowed young people that might have seen themselves as someone who would have dropped out, or who had jumped between school to school and didn't know where they're going to find a footing and a hold. Though that type of space and deliberate structure allows them to find a home, to build relationships, to earn credit and get their diploma, and then the sky's the limit, because we know the students who come to us, despite any challenges that they have, They're brilliant. They have so many skills. They have so much to offer the world. They just need more love and support and really, really strategic connections and wraparound services to help them get there, to get through over this barrier that's in front of them at that moment.
And then that's why you saw my design of my classroom is very student paced. So, and you heard a few students mention, it's there when they're ready. So if we, as you can tell, like there is so much that goes into our student before they're even ready to learn and even ready to like be in the classroom, if you will. And if that classroom setting is continued as like a teacher paced, you know, classroom, or we have students who come to us with like for biology, like they may already have 1 credit of biology and they still need their last credit to graduate. Well, if they happen to get into my classroom in December and that just happens to be where I'm covering something that they've already learned, like what's the point? And so it's very set up that everything is there and they move at their own pace, so that if they are having, you know, Amanda sees that they're having this type of day and they just need to be down in the studio or something like that, it's okay. They can come back when they're ready and pick up where they left off.
Thank you. I thought I saw a couple people start to unmute before. Does anyone have other questions?
I was going to point out the thing in the chat that Amy was asking you to do, Joey.
Amy, your question, can you share some wraparound services you provide your community partners you work with to provide for your students? Absolutely. We can jump in there, and please, like Amy said, interrupt us, because obviously we have a lot to say on these topics and we can keep going, but if anybody has a question, just put your hand up and we'll jump right to you. That we'd love to field more. But yeah, we have a lot of different wraparound services, and some unique things about our program, and Amanda and Renee jump in too, is we have a partnership with our next door neighbor, Wilder. We have a full-time therapist from Wilder who has an office in our building, works exclusively with our students. Next year we'll have 2. We have, and that makes a world of a difference for young people who have had bad experience with therapy in the past, but really need it, to be able, if they develop a safe space in our school and relationships with our staff and relationships with our psychologists, our therapists, they can, in our school, have that sort of ability to have those meetings and that therapy session, where instead of having to go somewhere else and kind of some of the fear and apprehension that might come with that, we have a full-time housing liaison. So many of our students, their parents and families are just dealing with housing insecurity and high mobility. And they don't, you know, if you've ever looked at, we're in the Twin Cities, I don't know where everybody else is from, but in the Twin Cities, it's a very complex system. And there's 2 different counties that are just jutted up against each other. So if you live in Ramsey, if you live in Hennepin, there's a different system you have to navigate. Well, we have a resident expert in that stuff who is equipped to help take students from the problem that they present to them all the way to the service. And if it falls off, because not all the time the shelter or the rent help or whatever service we connect them with, it doesn't always work out because people have complicated lives. They're still there to come back to them and say, okay, let's try again. Let's try something else. We have more social workers than I think traditional schools. We have a team of social workers. We have an enormous team of advisors, more advisors than we do teachers, which I think is pretty unique to our program, but I find to be problematic with a lot of the broader system, because they're youth mentors who spend an enormous amount of time honing in on their skills, and have a flexibility every day to meet with young people, to call them in the morning and say, hey, it's time to get up, let's go, I see you. But to be there if a student shows up at 11 o'clock with a crisis, to say, are you okay? What's going on? Let's get you connected with somebody. We work with the Legal Rights Center. We work with a lot of different community groups, parenting support groups, anti-gang violence groups. We have an amazing connection with another program that's been around for over 20 years, the Check Yourself Health and Wellness program, the HAS program, run by Shai Ellis, who helps students with sexual health and awareness. Working right now with the Department of Health to help with COVID information and help students get information about the vaccine and get connected to one if they make that choice, and making sure they know how to protect themselves and their family in this crazy time, but also working with students on teenage pregnancy and STDs and all sorts of other stuff. And I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. We really think it's important.
Mention, Rock the Cause, who we work with, and then also our Care 4 team meetings and how those work are pretty important too.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. Amanda, you might want to talk about the Care 4 team meetings, but we also partner with, and actually he works comes to our school and works. We partner with Rock the Cause, Scott Harold, and he teaches a business and music class, which is very obviously meaningful to our students, but he helps with like all these compilation projects and studio projects and brings in a lot of outside organizations and names you might know to collaborate with our students and really expose them to the music industry. And then I think what's one really important thing that we do as well are the Care For teams. I mean, Amanda, do you want to talk about it?
Sure. So Care For team meetings, we just meet as a group. Those consist of advisors. We have somebody from the educational staff as well too. We also have student support in there. It just gives us an opportunity to talk about, we're kind of grouped in different areas, or Aztec, Beta, and Deltas. So we're in our different groups. So it gives us an opportunity to talk about our students kind of on a deeper level. What's going on with our kids, maybe who's disengaged during this time. It just gives us that opportunity to kind of plan and work through any of the challenges that we may be facing. Which is really important because we all come across different students throughout our day. And if we know kind of what's going on with them, we can be like, oh, hey, I know Barbara mentioned this person during our meeting this morning. Let me check up on them. So it's just a really great way for us to stay connected about things. Ramsey County was another one we worked with this year, helping kids get jobs and things like that. I think really the sky's the limit as far as our wraparound services. I think we always do a really good job of, if we don't provide that, we'll find a way to try and help you or help our students kind of get over whatever barriers that they're facing so they can focus on their education.
And I think that's another part of our innovative structure. Those Care For team meetings take place every day, you know. They're morning meeting. And so we're saying as a school, it's super important that staff is talking about student concerns, things that are going on. So everybody, because everybody has a different relationship with young people, it gives an opportunity for people to share and for us to adapt real quickly. I saw something on social media last night. The student's going through a crisis. The student needs a connection. Oh, okay, they're in my class. I'll pull them aside. All this, every single day we have those connection points. And over the course of a school year, oh my goodness, like the difference that makes for staff communication. It also makes a difference in the way that our staff interacts with each other. Instead of being, oftentimes I think schools set up structures where, you know, people see each other in the space in a very traditional way, where it's time for a class, or there's time for, now we're co-moderating a lunchroom or things like that, but they're not connecting as professionals outside of their niche. I think it's so important that they're diverse in those spaces where, you know, a social worker, a special education staff, an advisor, a supports person are all there saying, okay, we're going to help this student in different ways, you know, and it helps our team really be in tune with each other and kind of work through stuff in real time, because we got to be there for the young people. Anybody else have any other questions? I'd love to field some more.
I know some people, it's hard to know what to ask sometimes. It can be overwhelming. Can you talk a little bit, especially today being the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, can you talk a little bit about how your community responded, your school community responded to that, and how you helped students process that as well?
Yeah, I think as you heard our executive director, who's in here, Tony Simmons, in the intro video, like one of the key pillars for our school is to operate with that social justice lens. And it's important for our students because it's real to their experience as young people in the world. They're living with agency and looking around and noticing that things aren't always just, fair, righteous, and they're experiencing incredible situations in the community that we live in. Even right now in the Twin Cities, it's a very challenging time for a lot of people in different areas. And when things like that happen, like when George Floyd was murdered last year, it's extremely traumatic for our entire community. It is not an isolated event, right? There are events like that all the time, and And that can lead to some of what they call compound PTSD. It's a major trigger for young people. It can be very painful, and people deal with it in different ways. You know, at our school, it's not a foreign thing to talk about, though, or to create spaces for students to discuss or to share power with students where they can co-create ways to process and to proactively deal with different situations that are going on in the community. Last year, you know, if everybody recalls, the summer was very intense, and moving at the end of the school year, not only the pandemic, but you know, we had a lot of unrest in the community. A lot of our students were seen in their own communities and their blocks where they're working. A lot of chaotic situations going on, some of them right in the middle of it, and very impactful learning situations happening during the school day. And I think what we immediately did is had circles. We use restorative circles. We work with community members. We work with our partners at Wilder to create space for therapy for those who need it, to create space for action for those who want to pay forward ideas and ways to proactively deal with any sort of injustice that's taking place in the community. And we had a number of virtual and in-person meetings where people talked through their issues. And we had projects over the course of the last year developed through partnerships with community organizations, but also internally. For example, more recently, we had a major project where students were following the trial in real time and participating in civic and learning around the different points of the trial, validating some of their own experiences, and also reflecting on what was going on and what was going on in the community in the protests in Brooklyn Center. Some students were there and validating some of their experiences and what they learned through those things. And so our school has a very deliberate and explicit anti-racist and social justice lens for a reason. We don't shy away from tough, courageous conversations. And we don't shy away from giving a student a microphone, allowing them to speak their mind and say how they feel and have some say and stake in how we react to things and what we do as a community to keep fighting for justice and moving on. That's a part of their validation process as well. Amanda, Renee, do you guys want to jump in on that too?
Well, I just had to give major props to Amanda because I think she's going to speak right now, but she is the one who does a lot of this work for our students all throughout the whole pandemic. And then even before that, but she hosts every day. When we're in school, there's a touchback every day where she does meeting with the students. Then Wednesdays we have community meeting, which is an longer version, and she's been hosting it on Facebook Live on our HSRA Live site throughout this whole pandemic. And I think one thing before I give it over to Amanda, first of all, it's an amazing job and it's probably one of the hardest jobs that there is at our school. But just the fact that we have always had this student voice and always have had this venue for students makes these, when these issues come up in our community, because they are right here in our community, the students are already ready for it and they come to us and they come to Amanda for that space to process it. So, I mean, the work that Amanda does is just absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you, Renee. You know, really, we were just trying to still find a space or an opportunity to allow the kids to really just still feel like they were at home and still feel like HSRA while we were, you know, went into quarantine and things like that. And then everything kind of happened with George Floyd as well, too. And a lot of our kids were really just reaching out and just wanting to have conversations and really just still be around us. So I think those opportunities that we provide for them, even as corny as it may sound, hey, we're live or whatever, like we still are able to engage those kids and still have those conversations if they're in the chat or things like that. We've had students come on and really express how they feel about different things that are happening. I remember I had one student reach out during the protests and things, and she's like, hey, I want to do more. And she was like really into photography. Take some pictures, you know, let's see what you're seeing out there, you know? So really just finding those opportunities and ways to connect our students so they can process and grow from all of these things as well too, is so important. So
some of our key validations are we want our students to be change makers and leaders in the community and participate not only within knowledge of civic institutions and governmental processes, but also in how human psychology works and be part of leadership for change, you know. And so students see that stuff in their portfolios and they know that they can validate complex situations into projects and describe what they're going through in their life. And I think the relationships that our staff builds with students and the space we give for students to be authentic allows for those projects to be all the more meaningful, because students can really show what they're up to and what their thoughts are, and process through that stuff in a way that is truthful to their experience. Kristen, I saw you had a hand raised there a bit ago. Do you want to jump in with another question?
I was just more curious, like, do you run a typical bell schedule, or do students just go where they need to go to get their work done? How does a day look at your school when it's normal school, when we're not doing distance learning or something like that? But
sure, yeah, it is not a typical bell structure, and we are evolving and changing as through this pandemic. I think the work we've been doing for the last 10 years to build on our system helped us in this pandemic, and then we're moving into a more of a hybrid type space next year, where it's even more so kind of what we've been up to the last 10 years. But what it is students have their own, like Amanda brought up, their own personal learning plan. And in that, they, you know, because students will enroll at HSRA anywhere from 14 through 21, you know, with randomly different like credits that they've earned it from other schools and major gaps from other schools for just different situations. Like Renee was saying, sometimes it's not a knowledge gap, but it might have been a situation where they just couldn't finish a class. You know, you never know. Because of that, they create their own personal learning plan where they have a lot of choice in what they want to do. And in the choices, we have some core academic workshops where you saw Renee's lens in the video of what those look like: station-based, competency-based progressions, where students progress at their own pace. They have, it's not a linear class where January we're doing this, February we're doing this, March we're doing this. It's more the whole system is there, the labs are there, stations are set up, and the students can tap in when they're ready for it and build a relationship with that practitioner and move forward. But then those workshops are juxtaposed with creative labs throughout the building, like we were talking about. We have a photography program called VIP, which is run by special education students. We have our business and music program. We have a visual arts studio. We have a dance studio. We have a maker space. We have an athletic space. We have an amazing studio. I feel it's almost sacrilege. We haven't spent enough time talking about it. We never really do, but it's unbelievable. It's just this amazing studio with an amazing team of professionals who help students produce albums and make their own work and do collective albums. And oftentimes our education will move into those spaces for co-teaching in the studio. All sorts of different creative spaces. And then we have clubs and pop-up workshops in our spaces we call the Impact Hub, which is in the mornings and the afternoon, where students can sign up to do like a one-off event, a field trip, an experience with a guest coming through, like leaving to learn in a lot of different ways, internships, things like that. And so there's student A and student B, who both enroll on the same day at our school with the same needs, by the time they graduate, might have a completely different experience and might run a completely different day. Through the pandemic, we've really developed out, and we'd started this beforehand, but then infrastructure in Schoology and in Google Suite, so that what we do in person is often supplemented by pre-recorded resources that students can tap into, or recorded opportunities for them to watch other students who maybe have completed a lab with the class on Tuesday and they want to do it Thursday afternoon. Well, there's a video archive that can help model it for them with other students kind of walking through their process. So the digital infrastructure kind of helps us be anytime, anywhere learning. So a student who maybe is working all week and can't come in as much as they want, but they have relationships with their advisor, their teachers, and they know what classes or opportunities they missed that week. If they want to work on it at 2 a.m. on Saturday night, they can. And we build an infrastructure and we have one-to-one technology so that they're able to do that. And some students need that. You know, we think it's an equity issue for us to have a lot of different options out there. So it's definitely not a bell-to-bell structure. We want students to have intention to their day, but we also have patience. So we have a lot of staff who are walking around knowing young people very well, saying, what's your plan for today? What's your PLP say? Okay, is that what we're doing today? No, we're not doing. Okay, well, what are we doing? You know, maybe they're chilling for an hour with their buddy, and that's okay. They've chosen to do that, but then they'll come back into the art lab in the afternoon. A lot of options kind of stacked on top of each other on purpose. It takes some logistical wherewithal to pull it off, and a lot of planning and a lot of smart people thinking through this stuff. And every year we refine it and get better. Some risk taking too, but it also, most importantly, takes some trust in young people. We want young people to practice freedom. We want young people to make mistakes while they're practicing freedom so they can get some positive experiences with caring adults to help them kind of refine their agency into a way that they can achieve their goals, you know, and remain committed and have a positive relationship with caring adults in a structure, you know, and we put that faith in our students and challenge ourselves to not regress into some more traditionalist, very, very rigid structures, even when it gets hard, because we know how important and emancipatory it is for young people to experience that type of freedom in an institution like ours. Renee, you can add to that, or Amanda too.
I think Amanda just texted that she's got to hop off. I think something came up. Yeah, I think what Joey said is accurate, and it may sound a little bit like chaotic, but I think that we all, as the adults, kind of know where we're supposed to be and how the structure is supposed to flow to help support the students in that movement. And I think that just that whole idea of like having a structured framework backing the chaos has really helped with the integrity of the program.
Thank you. We have a couple more minutes left before the end of the session. Any final questions? Maybe in the last minute, Renee and Joey, if you could touch on a little bit, you started talking about this, or you've kind of hinted about your own structure at your school of how your team collaborates together and works together and has a very different system than a traditional system. And how do you guys also provide space for your own team as adult educators to process this and to be present for students and to take care of yourself? I'll refrain from the self-care term because it kind of drives me a little bit crazy, but I think that that's an important part of the conversation, because in order to be present for students in the way that you are, you have to have healthy adults and who can be present.
Yeah, I think there's a few like structural pieces I can speak to, and then Joey, you can close it out. One for sure is that we respect if people just need a day. I mean, if you just need a day, you need 2 days, you take it, you know, like, and Tony's on the call. He's really good about saying, we've got PTO days. We know you're going to need to use them. You know, we kind of cover for each other internally because it's really hard to bring anybody outside in to help, you know, with how relationship based and the students we work with. But it's an intense setting. It's an intense group of students that we work with. I think the fact that I can say I've been there 12 years, Joey can say he's been there 11 years, Barbara, you've been there practically since the beginning, 20 years or so, I don't even know, speaks a lot to how much we take care of our staff, to how much we, you know, we have those daily Care 14 meetings. We have Friday staff meetings. We have some early releases. We do a lot of training. Tomorrow's our first time in person. It's an outdoor event, you know, with the whole staff together. We really take care of each other because we know that you can't really process this with anybody else. And it's not foolproof. We do have people who maybe, you know, turn over a little bit faster, but I think just speaking to the fact that we've retained staff like we have in such an intense setting shows the support that we try to give. You know, I think when Tony's really good about introducing us to outside opportunities and conferences and things like that we can go to, you know, book groups, book clubs. And, you know, knowing that some of us have kids and we need to make sure we prioritize people's family time too, are all things that I can say personally have really helped me. When I started at this school, I would have never thought I would still be here after all this time. It just seemed like it would be like a high burnout situation, but we try to take care of each other. So I'll just say that from my personal point of view, and then Joey, you can close this out here.
Sure. I'd say too, the school has been intentional about creating a tiered structure of leadership with a lot of practitioners involved. practitioners who are licensed teachers, people from all sorts of different situations that rise up into leadership and collaborate. And I think with that practitioner lens on leadership, there's a high intelligence around like structuring things to support people and making sure that we're really taking into account the human part of all this. And I think a lot of times schools are cool with burning people out and just saying next one up, you know, the kids need it. But you know, there's a refined skill set and intelligence and skill set that develops over years of experience working with young people, especially in a circumstance like this. It's really worth retaining, folks. And I think it's a very human thing. And I want to give a shout out to a couple people in the room. Barbara Murphy, who we brought up a couple of times, Andrew Adelman and Tony Simmons, who are here too, all part of our school community. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and especially to the HSRA team for sharing your expertise and for all the work you do for students in your community. So I did put a survey link in the chat. If you could share your feedback with us, we would love that. And this will be recorded, or it was recorded, and the recording will be up on the SCL for E website. You can definitely share it with other people that you would feel would benefit. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.